Hey guys, so this is the box that we are going to be collaging. It is actually a box that came into as part of it was a box inside of a box, but we're gonna do the interior box because it's a little bit smaller. So it's gonna be a little bit easier to work with in terms of scale, because as you know, magazines are only so big, so it'll be really nice to work with this size instead of something bigger. We just have less ground to cover. So this box has become a really useful resource as a shoebox too. This is where I've kept a lot of my collage materials over the years. And so these are some washi papers that I've collaged onto or cut out of different papers. So these are all envelopes that I was going to use for something special at some point. Anyway, so this one I used just some typewriter, some typescript on. This one was actually, it was kind of like a Bristol board. It was part of a bigger thing. It's an Andy Warhol quote that says, "In the future, everybody will be world famous for 15 minutes," which is kind of true with the whole YouTube thing. So what I did was I kind of just traced one of the existing kind of envelopes. These are envelopes that kind of shut like this, so they have like a little slot and you put stuff in like that. But I had collaged these with washi paper, but I wanted to use it on the cardstock. So what I did was I just kind of traced here on the inside. I would have traced this, cut it out, and then kind of folded this over to be kind of a template. And I think that this worked pretty cool, and we'll just be like using tape or something to kind of fold it or like bind it together. We'll be using some packing tape to bind it together. Yeah, so these are examples of that washi paper I was kind of trying to describe. A lot of them are like really metallic and beautiful. And so you can see here, this one is metallic, this one has some metallic into it. This one here is like marble, that's very beautiful. And so these papers tend to be a little bit thinner. They're still very beautiful and durable enough that you can collage comfortably with them, especially if you're using the paintbrush technique, and you get some beautiful things out of it. So this is that piece of paper I told you was like $10 for a sheet, and it was about the size of a poster. It was I just couldn't help it. It was honestly so beautiful. The marbling, the purple and the gold, and you can see on the inside it's like actually pretty textured. It's very soft. So once what I ended up doing was I had an envelope, and I just worked with my envelope as kind of a template. So I would do this, and then you just kind of fold it over, and you make sure that you leave enough space for this to kind of fold up on the inside. You could freehand them if you want. You could just put this down and kind of put this down, trace it, and then put this over and like trace that, and then you'd have pretty much a perfect, a perfect kind of cutout for that. So these ones are very, very beautiful, and they've lasted like really well over time just with the packing tape. So you got to be careful when you're taping down, so that way it's nice and smooth. This stuff worked really well. It actually took much better than some other, materials that I've worked with. Some materials tend to bleed over time. This is a piece of washi paper. So at the art store that I talked about in Guelph, they would sell like packages of a bunch of different types of sizes. So this is one of the ones that I got there, and it's kind of got this beautiful like white on white texture in the background. I don't know if you can really see that with that, but there's quite a lot going on, and that just happens to almost fit perfectly on top there. So I think that that'll be my first side. We've got like this beautiful kind of island shape on here, so maybe this will kind of fit onto another side. You can also use your fingers and kind of just like run your fingernails alongside, especially for magazines, because they're so thin, and once you've kind of like scored both of those sides, then you should be able to just kind of grip it. So that'll probably be good for one side. And as we can kind of see naturally as we're going here, some blues and whites are kind of coming out. So this seems to be like the color scheme we're going to be working with. This is kind of beautiful as well. Got some coral on one side. So what I'm kind of doing here is I'm just kind of feeling out the edge. I'm just going to take my fingernail, I'm going to run it along the edge, and it's going to kind of create an indent where my edges should stop. There we go, and so now I can kind of just casually see it and cut it with scissors. Pretty good. Be a little smaller. Go to the inner cuts here. That's better. That's more or less perfect. Got one side, two sides. Three side plus maybe one of these or something. Three sides. We need 6 sides for the box, more or less. Here are some more envelopes that I found. These are the ones that I had originally kind of used with National Geographic cutouts. So I would find like a big double page or like something that would almost fill the whole edge, and then I would just glue it all down. Like I'd paint it all and then stick it down, and it would become an envelope, like a pretty nifty looking envelope, full graphic. I haven't done these sides yet, but I kind of like them anyways. Like maybe I'll put like a little bit of gold or silver leaf on the edge and just kind of leave that craft paper. So rainforest, this one was vertical, and then it would fold over like that. This is those ice caves that we saw. And it says, Russia, lit by torch, an ice cave in Kamchatka Glacier glows like an entrance to the underworld. The pocked walls and ceiling are layers of compacted snow more than 20 feet thick, carved by hot springs from the Mutnovsky volcano. Photo by Denis Budkov. Very beautiful. This one was like a super solar punk image that I kind of pulled from a National Geographic. And again, it just kind of folds over. This one I was using multiple images, and then once I started realizing that I could just do like one big image instead of a bunch of small images, it became like a lot easier for us. So I kind of had this to start, but I never finished that one. Probably a little bit much for the glue. You honestly never really need that much glue. I was pretty lucky with how I kind of ballparked the last bit, but to that time, maybe not so much. Make sure you always put your glue cap on right away so that way your glue doesn't dry out. And if you get any glue on your fingertips, just kind of put it in the water and use your wet rag to kind of clean your fingers. So the things that we're going to be working with are our handy dandy glue brush, which we use only exclusively for glue. It was at one point used for paint, but now it's been converted to just a glue brush. So we have our glue, our water, and then our surface that we're going to collage onto, as well as all of our papers for collaging. So I'm going to start by kind of getting our brushes kind of nice and full of glue, and we're just going to give a nice even coat on top. You know, I want to say generous, so it's like make sure that it's nice and coated evenly. You don't want too much glue buildup. Yeah. But you want to make sure that there's like a solid amount of glue there, a solid coat of glue. So you don't want it to be like goopy, too overly goopy, because if it's too thick, then your paper is going to ripple. It's going to buckle because there's too much. And now we're just going to put it down like in one kind of nice movement. So I'm going to put it down nice and just kind of, you can move it around a little bit at first and then kind of smooth it down, make sure it's nice and all the edges are glued down. And then we'll let that dry. We'll kind of give that a second. We can work on the other sides while this is kind of still wet. So I'm just going to flip this onto the side here. And then I'm going to use, I think this, I don't know why I'm using this, but it doesn't quite fit the edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it out. There we go, that fits much better. Have your rag handy so that way you can always clean your brush. If you know that you have a big area to cover, then it's totally okay to be a little bit more generous with your glue because you know you're going to spread it out. You can kind of squish it back and forth. This is just good because it kind of makes the surface all touch at once. Same thing here. I'm going to cut out the edges. And then this gift box can be probably repurposed for other gifts once it's kind of served its use here. So I definitely think that collaging gift boxes is a cool idea because there's just lots of opportunity for it to be reused, especially if it's sturdy. If you find your glue is getting really gummy, then that would be a good time to dip it in water just to help it spread a little bit, because if it's too thick, that means it's drying out. And if it's drying out, that means that you should probably add a little bit of water to it. I'm gonna squish it back and forth, make sure it's all nice and on there, and then let it dry. This is also really nice to work with because it's kind of more like a poster paper or like postcard paper, so it's kind of a little bit thicker here, just more forgiving. So far, so good. Thinking maybe this island guy with strips. I'm going to be pretty generous here because I know that most of it except for this kind of section is being covered, so I'm just going to kind of paint all over the place here with my glue, being kind of quick because you know you don't want your glue to dry out before you have the chance to put your picture down. So I'm going to kind of push this all the way up to the corner here, leave my gaps on the edges. You don't want your brush to be too wet, so make sure that you're kind of dampening it off between glue brushings. So this section we know is about that long, so I'm just going to kind of give it a nice bit over the edge there. And again, squish it around so that way it's all covered underneath. And then same thing with this, I'm going to put this down here and kind of just brush it over the edge where I think it's going to go. Same thing, kind of squish it around in the glue. And there we go, let it sit. You can see that there's some air bubbles in there. I just take a second, kind of squish it down with your finger. If I would have done this properly, I would have already squished all the air bubbles out to the edge. I would have done my burnishing and stuff. The other alternative that you can do is like take a pin and poke it with a pin and it'll pop and help you get the air bubbles out on the inside. But I personally like kind of squishing them to the edge so that way you don't have like these damaged marks from where the pin's poked. So yeah. You can see that with the brushing, this is the first kind of magazine that we've put down, and you can see that the magazine kind of squishes down to the glue, so it'll kind of harden itself along there, and if there's too much glue, then it's going to ripple like a lot. Like this is rippling a little bit, and with any luck, if the layer is thin enough, then it'll kind of flatten itself out as it dries. But if it's too thick and too much glue, then you're going to get a lot of ridges like this. So I'm just kind of making a crease along the top here. So now that I can kind of look and see, I know that it ends here. I'm going to take a little cut. See how that works. Oh, that worked out pretty good. Just to wipe away the excess glue. This glue is actually pretty wet. I did not mean to make it this wet, but it might be okay right now because I can kind of squish it around, and there we go. Squish it around. Especially, you can put it right beside if you know that you want to know how tall it is. This is definitely going to be a confusing box. So I think that that's more or less kind of where we're at. Now I got this thing of bows at Value Village, so we can kind of go through this and see which bow fits the best. This is like the fun part, you know. Put a blue bow on it. We put a big teal bow on it. Oop. That's fairly pretty. Be kind of funky here. Put that kind of orange guy on it to contrast with the blue. I think we're going to go with the teal guy. So he doesn't actually have any, you know, any sticky thing on him. So what we're going to do is we're probably going to use painter's tape here. Just kind of stick it right on there. Stick this right on here, then we can reuse them later. Okay, so there we go. Remember, you can always put glue back into your container. Don't ever feel like you can't reuse glue. Kind of like scooping it, putting it back in. Just to save as much as possible, because we don't really want to waste if we don't need to, and it might be useful for us later. And once you're satisfied with the amount of glue that you've saved, as you're like, oh, I can't really want to scrape out the rest, then just add the water from your bowl into your container and kind of swirl it around. Because you're going to break up all your glue. Don't forget, as soon as you're done, to put the cap back on your glue. so it doesn't dry out. And then you're just going to kind of swirl it around, get as much glue off comfortably as you can, and then use paper towel to kind of wipe it up, as opposed to this going down your drain. There we go, and then this can safely be rinsed and washed.